Okay. All right. So next, we're going to be having, really soon, not quite yet, we'll be having Jim Warren, who is the founder of the West Coast Computer Faire, and Liza Loop. And they'll be coming up shortly. They're standing by for the connection.
We're connecting now to...
Hi, Jim.
Jim Warren.
Hi, John.
Stand by, Jim. We're going to be bringing up Liza in just a few moments.
Okay. It just said my video was turned off. That.
It takes a second. Just.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, you know how Skype is. It's owned by Microsoft. Liza,
Hi,
welcome
Hi.
to the GeekFest.
Hi, Liza.
We're
Hiya.
on.
Hi.
I'm seeing Jim, I'm seeing John, I'm seeing Oliver.
Nice to see you again.
And are you also watching the stream as well?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because my bandwidth is limited and I don't want to limit.
Yeah, we have some problems with the stream and people have to reload sometimes to check out if they are losing the connection. They need to restart the page, and we hope it works for the most of them. Yeah, we have Jim Warren on the left side and Liza Loop on the right side. And yeah, we are going into the details of what you have accomplished in early computing and until now. And we we like to start with Jim and talk about the Homebrew Computer Club, because you are an original member there, right? With John together.
I'm one step short of an original member. The Homebrew Computer Club. Let me back up for just a second. When did hobby computing start? Popular Electronics essentially started it in, what was it?
1975.
January of 1975. They had I'm going to hold it up here,
there it is,
the
cover.
Yeah.
That started it all.
They had a cover story on the MITS Altair. Now, about 6 months prior to that, they had another story inside about the Kim 1, which was a hobby computer. But the MITS Altair on the cover of Popular Electronics seemed to be the starting point. And within just a few months, a man named Gordon French, who was an electroniker in Silicon Valley, decided to get some of his friends together and people that he knew. Yes, John.
I remember, I think it was the third or fourth computer, the computer meeting, where they had it at Aristodero High School or Aristodero School, where Steve Dompier had a 6-transistor radio. He put it on top of the Altair, and it played Fool on the Hill.
Yeah. But the first meeting was Gordon French got together some of his electronics friends. He was an electroniker in unincorporated Menlo Park right next to Palo Alto, and held the first meeting in his garage, single-car garage with a dirt floor. I think there were 6 or 8 people there. Well, I missed that meeting, but I did make it to the second meeting, so I'm sort of part of the beginning of the Homebrew Computer Club. But the Homebrew Club it started a few months later, and it just exploded as word spread around Silicon Valley. am I giving you feedback?
No, you're
Or am I
fine.
talking-
I just wanted to say I also missed the first one, so don't feel bad.
Yeah. Yeah. But the meeting went from meeting in his garage, it got too big, he didn't have enough chairs, then it moved to a school, I think, for a while, and then it moved 3 or 4 places into a classroom at Stanford, and finally ended up at the auditorium of SLAC, Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, which was this huge room seated 300 or 400 people. It had I sent you, Oliver, I sent you a picture of that meeting room. Can you put it up or not?
I didn't got this mails. Maybe it got
Oh,
lost somewhere.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Anyway, it seated maybe 300 or 400 people. It was a lecture room where it was banked, and down in the front was the speaker.
I have
Unlike
I have this photo on our start page at geekfestberlin.com. It's a photo made by Lee Felsenstein. And
Yeah.
it's on the start screen of our page.
Good. Okay, good. But you can get an idea of the size of it. And this room was commonly packed. All the seats were taken. People were standing up in the back of the room, sitting on the stairs going down to the podium area, down to the lecture area. And unlike almost every other organization I'd ever been a part of, or I had chaired, they operated in a very different way. It was really fun and phenomenally productive. Lee Felsenstein had become the dictator, the interlocutor. Gordon French just was content to move off the side and take care of the software library. And Lee would wait until enough people got into the auditorium, in his opinion, and then he'd slam a stick on the podium and say, "Okay, let's settle down. Let's start the meeting." And he'd describe how the meeting worked. It has 2 parts. First part is the mapping session, in which anybody who wants to can hold up their hand, and whenever I decide, I will recognize them, and they can talk as long as they want to until I get tired of listening to them. Then I'd say sit down and go to the next person. And that went on for maybe an hour or so. People would stand up and say, "I have," or "I want," or "Have you heard about?" or "I don't think this works," or "You have a solution to this problem." "I've got a solution to this problem." And after an hour or so, whoever was in there had spotted 5 or 10 people that they wanted to talk to. When Lee felt that it was time, in his dictatorial opinion, he would say, "Okay, mapping session is over, now it's random access." And people all over the room would start milling around, going to people that they wanted to talk to exchange information. What, John?
Yeah, there was a short break, I think, between the random access and the mapping periods. I remember, because during one of those times, Steve.
Maybe it was in the early days, but it certainly wasn't when in the auditorium. I mean, boy, when he said, "Okay, random access," just everybody went every place, and. I referred to it as Silicon Valley's trade secret swap shop. Because, all sorts of people from industry, from Signetics, Fairchild, Intel, Hewlett-Packard, were attending these meetings, and, "Oh, somebody has a solution to that problem? Oh, I'm going to go talk to him." Or, "Oh, that guy has that problem. I had that same problem. I solved it. I'll announce it, and then maybe he'll come to me." And he did. And I mean, it probably drove the patent attorneys crazy. But it was just a phenomenal meeting. Just one short story about it, or short quip about it, is one of the things that homebrew or hobby computer people commonly got in talking to somebody else who wasn't already in hobby computing was, well, you have a hobby computer, but what do you do with it? And the answer was, the same thing that you do with a model train. You enjoy it. You play with it. You see what it can do. You change things. And it was just a phenomenal meeting and a phenomenal set of meetings. And because I was also, by that time, editor of Dr. Dobb's journal, there were like three publications. There was four publications. There was People's Computer newspaper run by Bob Albrecht.
Yeah.
There was Byte magazine.
I want to go a little bit to Lisa and
Sure.
ask her if she also ever was at Homebrew Computer Club.
Yeah, not very often. It's funny because I'm republishing the Homebrew Computer Club newsletters. People are beginning to associate me with Homebrew, and actually, I think I only went to 2 or 3 meetings, but I also wrote a little bit for the newsletter, and so I was a very minor character. Also, I was only one of the few women there, so that also creates prestige in today's situation. But about the same time that Homebrew was starting, I started the Sonoma County Computer Club, and news of Homebrew filtered up north, Sonoma County, and my Sonoma County members were going down, going down to Park, which is 80 miles, 100 miles from here, in Sonoma County, and they'd come back to Louisiana and say, "Oh, we learned this, we learned that."
Great.
So yeah, I
That
had a
was
great time. But
the same time you had what was the name? Computer County Club?
Sonoma is the name of the county,
Yeah. Okay.
and it's in the country north of San Francisco, and because the area is quite rural, we often refer to things going on in Sonoma County instead of referring to the specific cities. So I was in a small town, but we drew from all over this area, which is, I don't know how many 100 miles across. And the largest city is San Francisco. Menlo Park is another hour's drive south of that. So if you were a techie and you were living in Sonoma County, you had to go south in order to get your fix of other techies. And it's amazing when you sort of run up the flag and say, well, I know there's techies off in the woods here. Would you like to get together? People show up.
Yeah. And yeah, Jim.
So essentially, people in Sonoma County had close to a 2-hour drive each way to get to the Homebrew Computer Club and then get back home. And furthermore, the Homebrew Club would do the mapping session, then the random access, and eventually people would start trickling out. And then the real hardcore would continue by going over, they closed the auditorium, but they would continue by going over to a beer hall and go on till midnight.
Midnight
Yeah,
wasn't
I remember
necessarily
that.
the time to stop.
Oh, no.
I don't remember the name of it, but I certainly remember the watering hole. At the time, they would people smoke in there, and I never showed up there because of my allergy to smoke. But I know that hall very well. And Warren, I have a question for you. Were you the one that did the Silicon Valley Gazette or Silicon Valley Gulch?
Silicon Gulch.
Was that you?
Silicon Gulch Gazette. Yeah.
That was you.
There were, by then there was a standard name, or everybody referred to the south end of the San Francisco Bay Area, San Jose, Menlo Park, Cupertino, where Apple is now located, Palo Alto. That whole area down there was filled with electronics companies and high-tech companies, and had come to be referred to as Silicon Valley. Well, I thought I would, when I started to put out a newspaper to publicize the West Coast Computer Fairs, I decided to name it the Silicon Gulch Gazette. And that was where the name came from.
It used to be called the Valley of Heart's Delight, and in a sense, and be all beautiful apple, plum, peach orchards.
Oh, you're talking about the Silicon
what's now
Valley.
Silicon Valley, yeah, was the Valley of Heart's Delight before that. So some of us are interested in getting a little bit of that back from the electronics industry.
You want me to go to the, yeah.
We have your version of Dr. Dobb's.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, here is the very first issue.
Yeah, you've got the original. My one is reprinted. Reprinted.
Yeah.
Great, you have the originals. Yeah. And,
well, you want to know how that got started?
Not long later, you started the first computer fair, Jim, right?
Well, let me back up to Dr. Dobb's journal, because that was really first came the Popular Electronics cover story. Next came the Homebrew Computer Club, and incidentally, a whole bunch of other clubs started up around the United States. The largest one was the Amateur Computer Group of New Jersey. Started up just a week or two after, maybe within a month, after the Homebrew had its first meeting in a garage. And the two didn't know about each other for probably 6 or 8 months. I mean, they were just popping up, hobbyists were popping up every place. Well, People's Computer Company newspaper, which was mostly focused on games programmed in BASIC, very strange newspaper put out by a guy named Bob Albrecht, who had also founded People's Computer Company, where you could come and play with computers. Sure. John?
He had there was a small little strip mall right there in Menlo Park, and called the People's Computer Company, and they had PDP-8s connected together running EduBasic, and a lot of the kids from all of the local schools. I think, Liza, you had something to do with that, right?
I have that machine. It's part of the History of Computing and Learning and Education Virtual Museum.
Oh, that's
Go ahead,
great.
I'm sorry.
Well, part of Bob Albrecht had started. He was opposed to computer-aided instruction. He said, "I don't want computers to control people. I want people to control computers." And so he opened up this storefront operation right across from the train station in Menlo Park, and got Hewlett-Packard to donate a bunch of programmable desktop calculators to him, and any that were programmed in BASIC, and anybody who wanted to could come in after, many of them kids after school, and he would teach them how to program, and then they could write games and do that sort of thing. Well, when he shut down that, well, actually other people took over the operation of the walk-in center, and he started a newspaper also called People's Computer Company. Let me just finish this, John, and then just let me just get to Dr. Dobbs, or how Dr. Dobbs came along. When personal computing came along and the Altair became popular, they started getting comments from their rather small readership saying, "Well, yeah, we know about all this hardware stuff, but where's the software? We really would like some software. How about a basic interpreter?" And so a guy named Dennis Allison, who was on the board of directors of the nonprofit People's Computer Center, wrote a series of 3 articles on the design of a stripped-down version of BASIC called Tiny Basic. And the first article was a basic overall design article in the first issue. The next one was more detailed, and the final one was in the 3rd issue of that year. And he ended it saying, "Okay, let us stand on each other's shoulders, not each other's toes. If some of you implement this, why don't you send the code in, and we will copy it with a Xerox copier and mail it to anybody who sends us a self-addressed stamped envelope." Well, a bunch of envelopes came in. They sent out the
software in the
copies.
mail. Software.
They sent paper copies of the first thing that was done by, I can't remember the names now, out of Texas. And they got this flood of calls, of messages coming back in saying, "Don't stop now, we need more software." Well, Bob Albrecht said, "Hey, I don't know anything about programming in assembler language. I'm a basic programming guy. I don't want to do that. I can't do that in People's Computer Company newspapers." So they decided to start a magazine focused on more detailed, really techie level programming. And they gathered together Dennis's 3 articles. They gathered together Whipple and Arnold were the people who implemented the first version of Tiny Basic. And they sent in this printed out code, octal, of the whole thing, and said,
Looks like this.
"That's it. No, that's the fancy version. That's the source code." They had loaded, and the letter with it said, we loaded this in, and by flipping switches on the front of the Altair, address, punch the address book. Flip the switches to contents, punch the contents. But flip the switch to the next address, punch the address, and so on. And they said, "We got it running, runs great, but we had a little power glitch, and so now we're going to have to rekey it all in."
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that started the People's Computer Company saying, "Okay, let's put out a separate publication." They gathered together these articles, threw it on the desk of their paste-up artist who put together the newspaper, and said, Dennis and I are, Bob Albrecht and Dennis Allison said, we're going over to the local pub, put this together, it's going to be a new magazine of ours. And the paste-up artist didn't know anything about computing. He knew how to paste up printed content, or content for printing. So he started asking around the 3 or 4 people in the office, well, what's this about? "Oh, it's about a version of Tiny Basic." "Well, what's Tiny Basic?" "Oh, it's sort of an exercise in programming." "Well, what's tiny about it?" "It doesn't use up very many bytes of memory." And so he invented the name Dr. Dobb's Journal of Computer Calisthenics and Orthodontia, running light without overbite. The calisthenics is exercises. Overbite had to do with dentists, but we're not using very many correcting dental problems. But anyway, that's where the title of the magazine came from. Dennis said, "Now, I can't, I'm a busy computer consultant. I can't edit this." Bob said, "I don't know enough to edit it. Let's see who we can find who's a sucker, who would work for almost nothing for our nonprofit little company here and edit it." Well, I had just gotten kicked out of the PhD, terminated from the PhD program at Stanford. My thesis advisor, who was about to lose his own tenure grab, which he lost, called me in 2 days before, or a week or so before Christmas, and said, "Jim, you do good research, but you just don't write well enough to write a dissertation. Therefore, I'm terminating you." Well, that was unhappy, but I'd been a computer consultant for about 10 years by then, and so, okay, I'm not, I no longer get funding as a PhD research student, and I started phoning around my other consultant contacts saying, "Hey, if you have any jobs that you don't want, let me know, and I'm available." And I called Dennis. He said, "Oh, I have just the thing for you. Come right over to dinner." The upshot was he talked me into editing Dr. Dobb's journal, and that's how I got into it.
Yeah.
There's a few things that I want to mention also. Every Wednesday night at the PCC, which is the People's Computer Company, they had a potluck dinner. That was a precursor to the Homebrew Computer Club. Because every Wednesday they would have this potluck dinner, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times, and then after that they decided that maybe we should have a club. And that's when the Homebrew Computer Club started, and Gordon French had it in his garage. And by the way, Tiny Basic was written by Li Chun Wang.
That was one version of Tiny Basic.
Yeah, one of the versions, yeah.
So
The first one was written by 2 guys named Whipple and Arnold out of some little small town in Texas, which is, 1,500 miles away from Silicon Valley. But anyway.
And Liza, you started a very, very early computer learning center, right?
Well, Bob Albrecht was my mentor. What happened for me, I mean, we were all intersecting. I figure there were about, maybe in the first 10 years, there were about 5,000 different people who were interested in making sure that the public, John Q. public, the ordinary people, learned about computing in order to fulfill what Bob Albrecht's idea, that people should be in charge of computers and not the other way around. So in order to stay in charge of computing, you had to know enough about it. What I used to say is, when you really understand and you're computer literate, you know when to turn the damn thing off. And you know that computers repeat solutions to problems that humans create. I mean, humans create the problems, humans create the statement of the problem and the algorithm to solve it. And then they program the computer. But you don't do that if you're not going to solve the same problem twice. Because you've solved it once before you can write the program. Anyway, what was the inspiration for me to begin with, which is one of the questions you sent me before this interview, was I took a course in Montessori education. And my first son was a newborn at that point, and I knew I was enough of a rebel so that I would have to supplement his education, because I would probably, even if he didn't rebel about school, I'd probably make sure that he had trouble in school. So I was preparing to be a proactive parent, and I took a course in Montessori education, which was co-taught by Dean Brown, who was a computer scientist. He actually subsequently started the Zilog Corporation, which made the first competitor to the Intel chips. Anyway, so Dean co-taught this course. I spent 5 minutes listening to Dean talk about teaching 5, 6, and 7-year-olds how to program in a text language called Pilot their Montessori lessons so that the other kids could play their Montessori lessons as computer games. And I said, that's my career, that's where I'm going. And I haven't looked back. That class met once a week for a couple of hours, and sitting in class one day, I decided that what we needed in order to promote public computing, not just for special Montessori kids in one school, was public access computer centers. And Dean, I think maybe was on the board of PCC at that point.
People's Computer Company.
People's Computer Company. He was also a consultant at Stanford Research Institute. So he took me by the hand. I said, Dean, will you help me start this thing? And he said, yes. He and I and one other person were the founding members of it. And he took me by the hand and took me to Silicon Valley. And I went to potlucks at People's Computer Company. He took me to SRI, and I got to play with a mouse before anybody knew what a mouse was. I waited about 2 years from that incident. So that was 71. In 73, I decided I probably wanted to start this computer center, and in 75, I started.
Yeah.
And what was its name?
Oh, it's a pun on my last name, which is Loop. I married a guy named Loop and took the name. But the computer center is spelled like co-op. It's LOOP Center, and it stands for Learning Options Open Portal. That was before we started talking about, well, we did talk about ports on time-sharing computers. But the point of it was that it's a general-purpose educational nonprofit incorporated in California that's the umbrella. It's an umbrella for people to do projects related to any kind of learning, publishing, research. And the specific thing we did, first project that we did, was to open a second PCC, if you will, a public access storefront computer center, where people could come and play games. And I actually, my initial concept, which I never really implemented, was that it would be a video game, a pinball parlor. And people would come and play games in the game parlor, and then there would be, at least one of the games would be a computer terminal, and you'd start playing computer games. And if you developed an interest in that, you get to go into the second room, which is where you got more computer games and educational games in, and learned a little bit about computing. And if you got through that room, you got to go into the inner sanctum, where you were actually became a programmer.
And you started the center without having real computers there. You had the time-sharing terminals there, right?
Oh, come on now! This is the age of, quote, cloud computing.
Right.
We are back to time sharing. The timeshare computers were real. We did not have personal computers.
Were you involved with the Community Memory Project and Lee Felsenstein?
Oh yeah, I'd lived in Berkeley before that. So we just did. Germany seems to be where these streaming seminars are coming from. We just did one based in Lüneburg, and I haven't got the video up yet. But Lee Felsenstein, we've got an hour of Lee Felsenstein talking about the starting community memory and the free speech movement and the interaction of computing and the counterculture, if you will.
Yeah. Jim, yeah.
Just sort of an overview for a second. California started out, or was first settled by gold rush people who were going to go out and do something different and make a lot of money. And that was a century and a half ago. But even in the 50s and 60s and 70s and on through to today, there is still an attitude of rebellion, independence. I'm going to do my own thing. I'll be a risk taker and hope for the rewards, but I will also accept the possible penalties of doing it my own way and being my own boss. And that characteristic, which is probably most reflected in Silicon Valley, in the San Francisco Bay Area, but also throughout the most of California and in many ways much of the West Coast, is how I think that it's how much of this innovation happened. You look at the East Coast; they're much more conservative, socially conservative. They tend to follow the leader. They tend to join corporations and be corporate people. Go ahead, Lisa. I just wanted to get in that too.
As a native of Massachusetts, and one who got this attitude long before I came to California, let's expand your idea. I don't want to counteract your idea, but let's expand your idea and say there are pockets of innovators all over the world, and part of our objective is to spread that attitude and encourage people. So let's not get too provincial about it.
And Boston, Massachusetts are certainly hot. I mean, to me, that's the East Coast Silicon Valley. Go ahead, John. Or I'm sorry.
How many have seen the HBO series Silicon Valley? Anybody here in Germany? Pretty silly, isn't it? I thought it was pretty silly.
It's obvious that whoever wrote the script knows Silicon Valley very well.
Steve Wozniak had something to do with that, I believe.
I'm sorry?
Steve Wozniak had something to do with that, I suspect.
Lisa, you get a sign?
Well, there's another TV show that people might be interested in called Computer Chronicles.
Yeah, I like that one.
Is that still running?
Well, it doesn't matter because we have these wonderful devices that store and forward things. So
I was the founding host of Computer Chronicles and hosted it for its first 2 seasons.
Yeah, please.
But that was back in the early '80s or so.
lots of great things happened in the early 80s. This is the US
Yes,
Festival
sir.
that Steve Wozniak put on.
Yeah.
Is this from the Oz, the Oz Fest?
It's called the US Festival, 1983, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's a big
Great.
rock
I was
concert.
at both of them. I was at both of the ones, the one in '81 and I think '82.
But Jim,
Well, this is 80,
let's,
82.
let's talk about the computer fairs that you organize. Please come to that.
Oh, okay. All right. I had, I'd started editing Dr. Dobb's journal. There were basically 3 or 4 computer publications nationwide, and as a result, those very few publications got feedback from every place. All the new vendors, all the wannabe manufacturers, everybody was feeding information into the 3 or 4 of us who were editors, so that we in turn could publish it and circulate it and get the word out. And and then the amateur computer, Saul Liebus with the Amateur Computer Group of New Jersey started or had a hobby fest, a computer hobby fest called the Trenton Computer Festival or something like that. And it was a great success. Then someplace, I think Cleveland, the Cleveland Hobby Computer Club had a little conference or event, exposition. And that was a great success. Denver had one. And one night I was talking to the then treasurer of the Homebrew Computer Club and said, gee, I know, I had been called by a guy named John Dilks in Atlantic City, New Jersey, called me up and said, we are going to hold the Personal Computing Festival of 1976 here in August in Atlantic City. We would love for you to come. Well, I don't know. And be one of the keynote speakers along with one of the founders of Big Computers and his wife, whose name I can't remember at the moment. Wow, I could be on the same podium with him? Okay, and so I decided to go, and I was talking to the Homebrew Computer Club editor and saying, hey, are you going to go to this thing, to this computer festival in Atlantic City in August? And he said, Atlantic City? I don't think so. And I said, yeah, we were complaining about nothing happening out here. And I said, there really should be something happening out here. He said, I agree. I said, well, okay, why don't we put together one? And he said, Bob Reiling said, oh, okay, let's do. I went to the computer festival in Atlantic City. Atlantic City was a terrible place, but it was an ecstatic festival. I mean, it was jammed with people. It was in a hotel where the air conditioning broke down, but everybody loved it. And when a few hours before I flew out, I wrote up a leaflet saying, we're going to do a computer festival in the Bay Area. Anybody interested, please contact me. And I circulated it around among the exhibitors and anybody who wanted to pick it up. Got back to Bay Area, had a whole bunch of messages, and that was largely before email, come in saying, oh, we want to be part of that. That would be wonderful. I got a hold of Bob Reiling, said, okay, where will we do it? Well, let's do it at Stanford. that was what I was familiar with. And I was thinking about a conference, and if somebody wanted to exhibit things out on the patio, they could. Oh, well, Stanford said yes first, and then said, no, can't use it after all, fraternity is grabbed. So we went up to San Francisco and looked at the place where both of us had gone to computer conferences before, the Civic Auditorium in Hall in San Francisco, which was the biggest exhibit facility in San Francisco at the time. And looked around and said, now I was a hippie making $350 a month as editing Dr. Dobb's journal, but I enjoyed it. He was a mid-level engineering manager at Philco Ford. He was a straight guy. He wore a suit. I went in there in moccasins, blue jeans, and a torn T-shirt. And we talked to the convention center, and they said, yes, time is available. We said, okay, gee, we'd like to have it on this weekend that's open here. The convention center manager said, sure, happy to have you. It's open. Okay, how do we go about it? Well, first of all, you put down a deposit. Okay, how much is the deposit? I don't know, $600 or something. Oh, boy, that's a lot of money. Okay, I guess we can. And then what will the rest of the cost be? $13,000 a day, or some huge amount of money. And we sort of gulped and said, oh, well, I don't know, we'll think about it. Bob and I went back and sat down at a Bayside cafe and said, can we afford this? And I pulled a paper napkin out with the paper napkin holder and said, well, Atlantic City drew 350 people. We should be able to draw at least 500. And they charge $3. Hey, that's really be high priced and charge $5. But we'll have special prices for students and for seniors and that sort, and the Homebrew Computer Club members and so on. And I did that. They had about 180 or 100 exhibitors in Atlantic City. Gee, here in the home of Silicon Valley, you should be able to get at least 150 or 200. They charged them $100 to exhibit. Let's charge them 150. Oh boy! And I did the multiplication, did the addition, and I had no idea of this making any money. I'd already announced it just because it sounded like a really exciting event. And I totaled up and looked at the number, and I looked up at Bob and said, wow, not only could we probably cover the cost of the Civic Auditorium for those 3 days, we might even make some money off of this. What a deal! That's how the first Computer Faire came into existence.
The different prices on the tickets were a little problem at the beginning of the show, I heard.
Oh, yeah, it was a nightmare. I had, neither of us had ever organized a convention or a conference. Oh, incidentally, I called it the West Coast Computer Faire, spelled F-A-I-R-E, after what had been happening for some years of a Renaissance fair, where people came in costumes. So that's where I got the name F-A-I-R-E.
Yeah.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to talk about my experiences at the fourth West Coast Computer Faire. At that time, I was serving jail time for my phone freak activities, but I was allowed to go to the fair during the day and go back to jail at night. So at the fourth West Coast Computer Faire, I was working with Matthew McIntosh from the San Francisco Apple Pie Group, and they had a booth there. Right next door to the Apple Pie booth was the fourth interest group booth, and I had just developed a very early release of EasyWriter, my word processor program, and Matthew was selling the discs there at the show, and we couldn't reproduce the discs fast enough. We had crowds of people. Steve Wozniak come up to me and says, go to the Apple booth right away. So I go to the Apple booth just in time to see Randy Wigginton throw a pie in Dave Gordon's face for copying the Apple ROM.
It was crazy.
And Steve Wozniak put out this little brochure called the Zoltaire with write-only memory And it was this little brochure. He had thousands of these things printed up. He had people hand them out to people. And everybody was wondering whether it was a real product or not.
By the way, it was Chris Espinoza who was.
Oh, yes, it was
pouring the
Chris
cake.
Espinoza. Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Randy was insisting on that. He did.
Oh, he did not do that,
didn't.
okay,
No,
okay.
no, he didn't.
Okay.
No, no.
But that's what happened.
Oh,
Yeah.
2 fingers. Now it's not easy. Liza, go
Go
first.
ahead.
Liza, go first.
Well, I just have another story that relates to Jim's comment about the organization of the fair. Because I was the first speaker on the first day, and there were several simultaneous ones at 8 o'clock in the morning, and starting off the education track. And 3/4 of my audience was standing out there on the sidewalk trying to get those tickets.
Okay.
But the
Yeah.
room was full anyway. The thing that I think is interesting to say about this is because I've been running the hobby club in Sonoma County, I've been dealing mostly with hobbyists and engineers and wannabe engineers, hobbyist engineers. And so I titled my talk, Sharing Your Computer Hobby with the Kids. And it was a tutorial for geek types to go in and be a guest speaker in elementary and high school, junior high school classrooms. So I was, I set it up to be talking about how to talk to kids. I assumed that my audience already knew how to program in BASIC or Assembler and already knew how to turn a computer on. And what I ended up with was a room full of teachers, all of whom wanted to know how they could bring computing, how they could use computing in their classrooms or for themselves. So I just had to throw out my talk. The talk is published in the proceedings, and it's published on my acle.org website. But it was amazing that although we did get the geeks and the computer enthusiasts who already were in on the secrets, we also got this huge outpouring of people who had, as I had, this intuition or suspicion or fear that computing was going to be important, and you better learn about it.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun.
Jim?
Yeah. You asked about the problems, and Lisa mentioned that most of the people were outside. We didn't know how to run a convention, so I had set one price for kids, one price for teenagers, one price for seniors, another price for homebrew members, another price for university students, and a regular attendee price. Turned out to be, and we sold tickets before the convention, before the computer fair, as well as on site. Well, it turned out to be a total nightmare because we held the tickets and then they were supposed to come in with their letter and pick up the tickets. We had hundreds, if not 1,000 or so of tickets that we were going to try and hand out. And an hour or so after we'd opened the doors, somebody came up and said, "Hey, Jim, you realize that you have 5 lines wrapped around the city block that is the Civic Auditorium, and they're meeting in the back?" I said, "Oh, no." And I went out, and there were 2 lines around one side going to 2 of the ticket booths, or the entry booths, the pre-registered booths, and 3 more lines coming around from the other side going to the ticket for sale booths. And I came back in, but nobody was angry. It was sunny. It was a nice day. Everybody was, "Well, what do you know anything about this?" "Yeah, I have a computer." "Really? Wow." "Yeah, I have a computer." "Oh, I do too. How much memory do you have in yours?" "Oh, I have 512 bytes." "Oh, well, I have 1,024. I have over 1,000 bytes of memory." But people were just enjoying the day and chatting about what they were trying to figure out was going on. So I went back in, got Bob Reiling, and said, "Hey, we've got to clear these lines out." So he stood on one side of the pre-registered door, I stood on the other side, And we would say, have you pre-registered? Yes, I'm here to get my ticket. Here's a ticket, go on in. And we cleared out the pre-register line on the spot, and then the rest, the payees on site had to suffer along. But just one other thing is, during the height of the fair, and this happened with all of them, I started to go back in to check how the exhibition area was. You didn't walk. You sort of looked at which way the aisles were oozing, and you slipped into the one that was oozing in the direction you wanted, and when you got to where you wanted, you slipped back out to the side. The mob
Which was easier for you because you were on roller skates.
Yeah, I can remember the lines. I can remember people were picnicking in the park there, talking about computers while they were waiting in line. It was crazy. I'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah, about the third or fourth fair. I back when I was a math teacher, I also taught roller skating at night, and so I was really good on roller skates. And walking around that convention center, the size of a city block, for 4 days, 5 days, setup day, 3 days of show, a day of shutdown. Oh boy, I was really tired. So I decided, well, what the heck? I'm going to put on my skates and roll around. It'll be a lot easier. And on setup day, I was rolling around, and the exhibitors would sort of take a double take and said, "You're on roller skates." I said, "Yeah, I'm on." Wow, that's weird. Hey, look, if we followed tradition, this whole industry wouldn't exist. Oh, yeah. And the other advantage of it was not only was it much easier on my body, but it put my head up above most of the crowd, and it wasn't bobbing up and down walking, it was rolling along. So anybody who wanted to find Jim, look for the head that's rolling. Go ahead. I think we're close to your sunset time, aren't we? Or whatever you want to do.
Lisa, you had at the beginning of your Loop Center not so many computers there, and at one point Steve Wozniak showed up, right?
This is a segue from the Homebrew Computer Club conversation that we had, because in one of those mapping sessions, I was there, and when Lee recognized me, I said, "By the way, I'm taking computers into classrooms," and talked about Loop Center's program where we literally put our computers in the back of a pickup truck because they were not personal computers, and took them to the local elementary school and ran classes, 40 hours of computing classes for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. Steve Wozniak was actually writing BASIC for the Apple outside the hall while that was going on. Wasn't there also a talk often, Jim, at Homebrew? I think there was a talk as well as the mapping session and the free for all.
Talk about what?
Well, often there was an invited speaker as well at Homebrew.
Actually, that didn't happen until much later on. The height of the Homebrew Club were, boy, it was the mapping session and then the random access.
Okay, well, Steve was there. Steve heard me say I was taking computers into schools and into classrooms. And he came up and said, "Hey, I'm building this computer, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to show it around." And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, I don't have one for you yet, but I'll be in touch." And we exchanged our information, which of course was on paper because we didn't have cell phones and such. And that was 1975. So in sort of mid-76, he came up to one of the Sonoma County Computer Club meetings and showed the Apple.
Apple One.
Then,
I believe it was Apple II.
No, the Apple One.
No,
right?
It was Apple One.
Oh, it is Apple I, okay.
This was before the Apple was being sold.
This was at SCCS, Southern California, right?
This was in Cotati, California, in Sonoma County.
Oh,
in early 1976. And he showed an apple and said, by the way, which was a prototype, and said, by the way, I have something for you, and handed me a box, and I opened it. It looked like a pizza box, and said, what's this? And he said, well, that's the first Apple I. And I want you to take it into schools. And I said, well, thanks very much. I can take this motherboard into schools, but it won't do me much good. What am I supposed to do with it? He said, well, find someone who will build you a power supply in a box and go down to Palo Alto to this electronics store and buy a Cherry Pro keyboard, and this kind of monitor or that kind of monitor will work, so get yourself a monitor. Put it all together, and by the way, I'll be sending you a card to stick into this slot, which is an interface to an audio
Tape recorder.
And if you fiddle with this pot and the tone and the volume of the tape recorder, you may be able to get it to load BASIC.
Maybe.
So I did all that. So anyway, that's Apple I number one.
Yeah.
And he said, by the way, I wanted to take it and give it to you, and my partner won't let me, so I had to buy it. So,
You still own it, right?
well, I never owned it. Loop Center, which is a corporation, owns it.
Yeah, okay.
So it's the crown jewel in my collection of historical computer stuff. And I say mine, but it really belongs, the nonprofits that belong to the citizens of the state they're incorporated in. So it belongs to the citizens of California.
Oh, that's great.
I'm the custodian. And people often ask me, does it work? And all I can say is, it worked the last time I tried it, as well as it ever worked. But the rest of this story, I would not apply electricity to it now because it's a collector's item, and I don't want to find out that I can smoke it. But so I got it put together. Glenn Worstel built a power supply. I've got the keyboard is sitting in my living room. The computer itself is in storage because it's valuable now, and I don't want to have somebody steal it.
Yeah.
So it's squirreled away. I still have the monitor. I still have the box. But I got it all put together, learned how to load BASIC, was invited to take it to actually Windsor Junior High School to a math class and tried to teach a little BASIC programming language with it. However, a school class is 40 minutes. So, and the classroom we were in was being used by another class before the math class that I was invited to teach in. And so I couldn't get into the room before class. So the strategy was, because it took 20 minutes to load BASIC, so get in, and if you unplugged it, of course, it lost its memory.
It's gone.
Yeah. So that meant go into the classroom, plug it in, try to get it to load, let it load for 20 minutes, hope that it loaded, teach a little BASIC while the thing is loading. Then it's loaded. Then you can, and if you're lucky, it comes up on the screen and says ready. Then you type in 10 print, hi, here we are. 20, go to 10.
Yeah. We know that loop.
Okay, so if we were lucky, we could get it to do that. And in the earlier 20 minutes, I'd introduced BASIC and told the kids to write something that was a print statement. And so I'd type in one, and they'd get to run it and see that the screen filled up with hello, here we are. And then we'd press Control C, which doesn't do the same thing anymore. And somebody else one of the kids would type in their short program. However, we're now at minute 30, and that particular Apple I, the first one, overheated rather quickly.
Okay.
It would run for 40 minutes.
Oh.
So it would crash, and then I'd have to load BASIC again. So I went back to, let me finish it. I went back to Woz and said, this is great. This is exactly what I want, except that I can't teach in this context with this thing because it doesn't run. And Steve said, give it back to me and I'll fix it. Months later, I was calling him once every 2 or 3 weeks saying, well, how are you doing with the Apple? Because I had to use PDP-8. And I couldn't take it into schools because the PDP-8 weighed 200 pounds. It was a core memory. So after a while, Woz started saying, don't get impatient. It did come back to me. It still didn't work. I took it back to him again. Still didn't stay working. And after several months, he said, okay, I have something else for you. And he had a prototype Apple II. And so I said, okay, now what do I do? He said, well, just take the Apple one out of the box that you have, put this one in, plug everything in, and it should run just fine. And so I said, okay, well, do you want the Apple I back? He said, yeah, you can keep it.
Did you got the letter from Steve Jobs that was offering to swap the Apple I to an Apple II?
Oh, I think we did it on the phone. I don't know that there was ever a letter.
Okay, because he was sending out letters to all Apple I users, and a lot of them switched their original Apple I. I think they don't like the idea.
I have 200 Banker boxes of artifacts, of papers, documents, which I'm scanning as fast as I can to be the History of Computing and Learning and Education Virtual Museum, which is hcle.org. For anybody that's interested. It's not HOLE, which your spell corrector will try and get you to do. It's HCLE.
We have a link under your biography if anyone is interested.
Okay, anyway, I may have that letter, but the stuff is homogenized. It's randomly in the 200 boxes. So the first thing I'm doing is going through and saying, oh, this is a laundry list, this is my kid's homework, this is an artifact for the History Museum.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim, thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, just to comment about Woz. I mean, I knew, as you did, I knew both Woz and Jobs. And when Woz built the original Apple, he really didn't think at all about it being a product. He just wanted a hobby computer that worked the way he wanted it to work, that he could do what he wanted to. And he had gone to Hewlett-Packard, which he was an employee with them at the time, and said, gee, I'd like to build this computer, and my friend might even want to sell some of them. Could we do this, a little hobby computer? And the Hewlett-Packard executive said, oh, yeah, that hobby computing thing, that's not going to amount to anything. We give you permission because otherwise he couldn't compete. You're not going to be competing with Hewlett-Packard. Dumb move. But Woz was never and still isn't, I want to make money, I want to be powerful and wealthy and stuff like that. He was just, he was and still is a player. He liked to do interesting things that challenged the heart and mind. Whereas Steve Jobs, Steve was just amazing in so many ways. He was terrible in many ways, and he was one of the best promoters I've ever known. I mean, like when I think the second or third year after Apple had gotten started, there was a national computer conference in Anaheim, California, down in Southern California, for big computer people and big computers and big people. They took over Disneyland, and every hotel and convention facility there was used. Had like 100,000 people attending or something. Steve had the bright idea, Steve Jobs had the bright idea to offer if anybody is wearing a badge is an attendance badge at the National Computer Conference. You and your family can come into Disneyland all evening long for free. I mean, phenomenal promoter. When Apple hit the target that they had set for a year, he took most, if not all, of the Apple few employees at the time to Hawaii. But he was also somebody who refused to support the woman that had a child by, and refused to give any child support. Anyway, interesting times in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more time we have.
Oh, we have about a half an hour to talk, I think.
Well, let's talk about education.
Yes, let's do this.
Let's talk about
let's have a
take
look.
questions.
Yeah, okay.
computers, freedom, and privacy.
9:50. Yeah, we have about a half an hour. So, Liza, you really pushed the idea of bringing computers into education. I would say you were not in favor of the classical classroom setting, I think. Can you talk about that?
Thank you. Yes, I sure can.
Good.
I'd love to talk about that. And I just actually went to a lecture from somebody else who was talking about set and settings. This happened to be a talk on medical use of psychedelics that I went to a week ago. But I thought that the idea of thinking in terms of set and settings, and by set she meant mindset, is a really interesting way to look at learning and education. Because it's a combination of what the person brings into the environment, which is the set, mindset, and then what the setting is, which includes everything that's there as you're learning. So it includes the teacher, the classroom, or if you're on the street in a ghetto in an inner city, it's everything that's surrounding you. So what we've seen as we talk about the Computer Faire is that there was a general mindset of people interested in what this new phenomenon was of computing. And there was a huge outpouring of people who wanted to learn. And they would learn from anything, any way that they could. So I see that as a general metaphor for learning in general. The reason why I'm asking us to look at our educational system is because we've kind of co-opted the concept of learning to be used only to apply to that which is taught consciously or intentionally. But actually, just as anybody in these computer clubs could be a teacher. If you knew something that somebody else didn't know, I want to learn from you, you're my teacher. And not only that, if I've discovered or I've learned something that you don't know and you want to know, then I become the teacher. So this idea that we're all teachers, we're all learners, is wonderfully demonstrated in the growth of the whole popular computing. Yeah, Jim?
Before the Homebrew Computer Club got started, but in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, there was something called the Mid-Peninsula Free University, which was a radical spin-off and parasite off of Stanford. And in their statement of purpose, anybody could sign up, anybody could take any course, anybody could teach any course, and offer any course. It was a standard $10 a quarter or something like that. That was it. And in the statement of purpose, we said something about we hold that one is never too young to teach nor too old to learn, that the natural state of humanity is endless curiosity. And that certainly fits with what Lisa was describing.
And those
many
two,
of those, homebrew. I mean, many of those free university people ended up coming on into computing.
And so before the time that I'm talking about now, I was in Berkeley, and I think the first free university was in Berkeley, and Lee was in Berkeley, Lee Felsenstein. So, yeah, that's certainly the concept of the free university, free teaching, free learning the computer serves as a wonderful metaphor for that. Now I've lost my train of thought here.
Yeah, today there are a lot of online courses you can take, and do you think this is this something you thought of back in the days?
Well, actually, this comes out of the concept of distance learning, which has been going on since the Greeks. So, yeah, I thought of it, but I thought of it because I stand on the shoulders of many giants. So I think that the thing that computing brings to the party, the distance learning party, and the everybody a teacher, everybody a learner party, is what I used the phrase earlier, store and forward. In order to teach, many times we store the information that we want to offer to somebody else, and then we forward it to them. If we're limited to communicating face-to-face, then we store it in our own memories and we speak it or we demonstrate it. If we've got writing, whether it's clay tablets or Gutenberg Bibles or whatever, we store it in a written form and we forward it. And we add that to our face-to-face teaching. Now we have these handheld devices that we carry on our person or our Google Glasses or whatever we've got, where we can receive the stored messages anywhere, anytime. Not quite, because it's only anytime, anywhere where there's a Wi-Fi connection, and that isn't most of the world.
Or a cellular connection.
Yeah.
If you can afford it.
If you can afford it. So we have the capacity to have universal connectivity, but we haven't implemented it yet. So we're all learners all the time. We're all teaching all the time. Many of us, certainly the privileged world, if you will, have access all the time to these computer-controlled communication devices. It completely changes the setting for supporting learning, that we call supporting learning teaching or educating. That's revolutionary. And it's 50 years since the free universities first started, and we're still struggling with, do we create environments where we put walls around a group of people whom we push into the room that has those walls, limit the stimulus that's in them, and tell them, you have to learn what somebody else tells you you're supposed to learn. Not only that, we're going to take away all the stimulus that might let you learn what you're interested in learning. So what we're doing today is taking iPads, which are wonderful receiving devices for all this stored and forwarded, whether it's online courses or whether it's an app or whether it's Wikipedia. We're taking those into a classroom. The kids know perfectly well how to get to the outside world with it. So what we have to do is give that machine a frontal lobotomy before we can let them have it in a classroom. There's a whole lot more education going on outside the classroom than there is inside the classroom. So when people start asking these questions about, well, do computers help teachers? It's like, of course they do. Of course they are a potential tool. They're a tool for everybody who wants to learn to use them. But do they help teachers to truncate the ability of the teacher to control what the learner is learning? I see them more as Trojan horses that break down the walls of the classroom and make it possible for anybody, any learner, to access a huge variety of teachers. And by the way, anybody who writes an app or writes something that they put online is a teacher. It's not just the person standing in that 4-wall walled classroom
Yeah.
with an intent to teach.
Tomorrow you should listen to the speak of Ruben Paul. He will be he will be on our last panel, and he's a 10-year-old, and he's the CEO of his own gaming company, and he does educational software, and he does cyber awareness trainings for kids. So he shows them how to write a good password. And it's really, when I hear you talking, I always a little bit think of Ruben. He's you need to, maybe you contact him. So
Ruben
Paul.
can be a wonder kid.
Yeah.
Ruben has the advantage of having the support of his father, who is being the scaffold, so that he, as a 10-year-old, can teach what he knows. That's a really important, again, that's the setting. And what computing does is it lets the huge number of us, some of us are children, access teachers when they don't have that personal parent or family member or community member who can teach them what they need.
Okay.
You got to turn something off.
Jim, you had a question that I ran
Oh,
over.
I was just going to, I taught mathematics for 10 years, and I've certainly paid attention to what goes on in schools and educational systems for the rest of my life. And one of the things that I've found over and over is that there's still many teachers, usually older ones, who are very fearful and suspicious of computers. And they don't much want, many of them do want to learn about it, but many of them really resist and don't like it at all that these computers are intruding into their instruction. So it's a problem.
Yeah, I ran across that a lot with some of my old friends from the ham radio days. They're now 60, 70 years old too, and they just don't like my computer. Like my brother, for instance, he's always getting himself into trouble with his computer, and always calling me to help him out. So he's a Windows computer person.
Well, that gives me a chance to mention something else that I think is really important. Especially this event is called the GeekFest, and I assume most of the folks who are participating are pretty technically oriented. And what I found running the Public Access Computer Center and doing, I'm a professional beginner. I don't get very far into the techne of the computer itself. And I'm not really interested in the machines. They're interesting puzzles, but what I'm interested in is people and how people learn and how people can make wonderful, fulfilling lives for themselves. I think that everybody needs to be computer literate in the sense that they need to know enough not to be intimidated, enough about computing, not to be intimidated by the customer service person who says, oh, you can't have that information because the computer won't let me give it to you. It's like, no, the computer is not the gatekeeper. There's a person who's responsible. Don't hide behind the machine.
The computer did not make the mistake. The programmer or the user made the mistake.
Or sometimes it's not the programmer. Sometimes it's the person who's instructing the programmer and telling them what to put in, what to make the machine do. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Don't let people become peripherals to the machine. There's also that if we're going to have democratic decision making, we're going to have to make some decisions about what we let computers do. This will give a segment for you, Jim. And that means we have to know enough about the technology to know what kinds of controls we want to have on it. I think it's perfectly valid for a teacher who is a wonderful teacher in some area that is not technical to not want a computer in his or her classroom, and to not want to have to take themselves away from their own expertise and specialty and become a specialist in something else. That's not the point. But as democratic citizens, we have some need to be generalists. And as intelligent consumers, we need to know enough about computing to know when somebody is bullying us by putting the machine in front of them. And as workers, as wage earners, we need to be able to use these tools for our own productivity to make sure that we can continue to support ourselves and our families. So those are my reasons for wanting sort of ubiquitous understanding of computing, not because I think everybody's going to become a geek. Me first. I'm not going to be either.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
I like to ask the people here in the room if there are any questions that you'd like to address to our speakers.
Oliver?
Okay, no, actually. Okay, yeah, Jim?
Just a quickie before I forget it, because I've been forgetting it throughout the session here. There is a German documentary filmmaker who came and interviewed Larry Tesler, Lee Felsenstein, myself, and several others. And the documentary is called The West Coast Revolution, How a Bunch of Nerds Have Changed Our Lives. It will be aired on German and French public television early or sometime next year. He was hoping for this year, but it's going to be next year. But keep an eye out for it. It's an hour-long documentary.
Yes, we do.
And if you want to talk about the civil liberties stuff, that's fine. And if not, that's fine too. I like the idea of some questions from the audience.
Yeah, we have to say that 1 hour talking to you is not enough time to even cover only a part of what you both have done. So yeah, we couldn't get in all the questions that we had on the list, and that was clear that we don't make it. So Liza, you said one time moving electrons is more efficient than moving people.
That goes back to the idea of the classroom and learning happening in the classroom. I spent a good deal of time thinking about future social systems and future economics, and it's expensive to move people. So if what you're talking about, if what you're teaching and learning about is information based, then it's going to become, and it already is, we see this because we see online courses. You mentioned online courses again. It's much cheaper if we have this ability to move sound and video and pictures and text via electronic transmission. It's much cheaper to do that and bring the information to the individual than it is to bring the individual into a lecture hall or a classroom. There are so I think what we're going to discover in the future is that the premium education, the thing that's expensive and specialty, is face-to-face. And there are a lot of things that we must do face-to-face. You can't learn to transplant a seedling. You can't learn how hard you can squeeze that little seedling to take it from the medium that you sprouted it in and put it in the garden without being there and doing that. There's a whole lot of tactile motion. Plus, there's a whole lot of spiritual fun in doing it. You can't learn to play in a live orchestra if you don't have the other people around. You can simulate it on a computer, but you can't do it in the original feeling. You can't learn to swim on a computer. So there are many, many things that we're going to learn in the future and today that we can't learn by this store and forwarded computer medium. But there are many things that we can. And what we have failed to do in the 40 years I've been working in this field is to really look at our education goals and say, with the lens of saying that it's cheaper to deliver the information online than it is to deliver the people to the lecture hall. What must we do face-to-face, and what can we do online? And arrange our use of computing by that criteria, instead of whether we can get the school board to buy iPads. So there's a whole lot of, if you go back to very basic things like what's the most expensive thing to move, a person or a bit or a terabyte. I mean, right now we can move a terabyte of information more cheaply than we can go downtown to the local grocery store. So we need to be thinking in those really basic terms if what we're going to do is optimize our use of the technologies that we've developed. And we're developing them so fast that we're in thrall of the latest, greatest new thing, instead of really looking at what we could be doing, what we have in our hands today, without even replacing it with something newer. Yeah.
Steve Wozniak writes to me and said, cool, there would be no Apple without the Computer Club. So Steve is listening to this right now. I'm hoping he can pop in on Skype and say a few words.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful. We can take this as an end, because we have come to an end of our panel. When I'm right in the time, am I?
Mine says we're at 12:44 California time.
To 9:50. Yeah, we
got about
just
5 more minutes.
have about 5 minutes. So, but I thought this is really a nice, sum up. And Jim, do you want to?
I was just going to say, do some people in the live audience there have some questions?
Yeah,
or I could mention
I've
computer
asked-
freedom and privacy stuff.
I've asked, are there any questions to our speakers from our audience? No, there aren't.
Could I take a couple of minutes to talk about the civil liberties aspects of computing?
Yes, you can.
Back in 1990, here in the United States, the government started conducting a bunch of raids of alleged computer crackers. Incidentally, I use the word hacker in a positive sense, just like it was before the media perverted it to mean something negative. If I want to talk about a black hat hacker, I'll call him a cracker. And they started conducting these raids, and they would go in, sometimes with guns drawn, at least allegedly, pick up people's computers, their pre-recorded, labeled music discs, and even picked up lollipops and candy from one computer guy's desk and said, we're taking these. They're no longer your property, they're ours. Well, what about civil liberties? The computers don't have civil liberties. You as a human do, but if you want to go to court, you can try and get it back. At your expense, of course. In the meantime, it's ours. And the idea was to really shut down people who were using computers to do bad things and doing bad stuff online. But those of us online just said, whoa, what is this? And Dennis Allison said, by the standards that the government is claiming, that anything that you haven't purchased is evidence that is on your computer is a crime. By that standard, no computer professional could exist, could continue to do business, because all of us share code. That's what we do. We stand on each other's shoulders. I said, well, I was older than most folks, and I said, well, I've had friends who were cops, and I think what we need to do is just get them together in a room and tell them how things are online. They just don't understand. And Ned said, oh, cool, you know how to run conventions, conferences, organize it. Okay. And I called the head of these raids with the government, a woman named Gail Thackeray in Arizona, and introduced myself and said, I'm a computer professional. Many of us online are very concerned about these Sun Devil raids. That's what they call the raids. And we would like to have a conference and get everybody together, computer people and law enforcement and any other groups that are interested, and talk things over, because we really need to talk to each other. And she said, exactly. We would love to have that. I will guarantee that law enforcement will show up in major participation, because you people online don't understand how things are, and we need to teach you. And after I hung up, I thought, hold it, what? I thought that's what we were going to do to them. Well,
we're all teachers.
The end result was the first conference on computers, freedom, and privacy.
Yeah, we sadly didn't found the time to talk about that topic.
Okay, anyway,
so,
it's worthwhile to pay attention to the civil liberties aspect of computing.
I want to say one thing about the freedom and privacy. Don Ingram was the prosecuting attorney for the BART ticket scam, and I was talking to another hacker who also had his prosecuting attorney there, and all four of us were sitting there talking about our prosecuting attorneys, and they were also engaged in the conversation. It was quite interesting.
Well, and there were actually more people in that conversation, as I recall it, because I passed by when it happened, or when there was a discussion where Don Ingram, the prosecutor, was with you and 3 or 4 other people, and one of the people in the group said, "You know, John, it's not everybody that you'd introduced Don Ingram as my prosecutor," and he said, "You know, John, it's not everybody who has their own personal prosecutor."
Yeah, actually, it was the longest pretrial in history for Alameda County.
Okay, we always have to look on the times, because we also make some breaks between our panels, and we have reached the time that this panel finds an end. And I'd like to thank you both to have been here for us and speak to us. And
thank you so much for organizing.
Round of applause.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Oliver. And John.
Great pleasure.
Nice.
And Jim.
Nice. We could have talked hours and hours longer.
Well, there are more hours, so we will talk hours and hours longer.
I'm sure
And
we'll all
watch that
keep in touch.
documentary next spring.
Yeah. Thank you all for participating. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Eine Pause.